let me jump into Unreal 4, show you what I did tonight. I spent most of my time in Xmine, by the way, in case it's not obvious. But let me jump in the game. So I've got the flashlight, I can sprint, I can crouch. Oh, and by the way, I fixed the crouch. I don't know if I showed that in the previous video. No, I think in the previous episode of this, I did the default crouch from Unreal, which it doesn't work well. So I think I mentioned that I was going to create a custom crouch function, which I did. And this one's a lot better because this one, as you can see, it's nice and smooth. When you crouch, it's smooth, and when you stand back up, it's smooth. It doesn't just pop from standing to crouch and from crouch to standing. But what I really wanted to show you was this. If I use the search button, and if you remember I mentioned it was the left mouse button, I can zoom in and check things out. Now, you'll see this weird red object that shoots out from the camera. That's just a debug item, but what it is, it's the spherical line trace that shoots out from the camera and hits objects. And when it hits an object, I can get the information from that object. I can check the object to see if it's the knife on the table, and if it is, then I could do more stuff. For example, I could throw up a hint on the screen that says, that looks like a weapon. Maybe I can get it, you know? Or I can hit it, or maybe it's a door and I put up a hint that says press action button to open door, right? And then I try to open the door and then I get another hint that says the door's locked, you dummy, go find the key. So it's kind of cool stuff like that I can do with this. You can see that the spherical trace doesn't go that far. It doesn't go through the world forever. It only goes for about a couple of hundred units. And that's because I didn't want you to be, you know, at one end of the dining car and be able to check out the door on the other end. Although technically, that's all gameplay tweaking stuff. If we start prototyping and testing this out and play testing over and over and we realize, you know what, this distance is too short. Let's make it so that you can trace all the way across the dining room car to the door at the end to get a hint about it. Then, you know, we can do that. And that's pretty much all I did today. I still haven't done the head bob. I plan on doing that at some point. Just not sure when. So if I go to Blueprint, here's my sprinting functionality, which sprinting functionality is working. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change it from work in progress to working, and I'm going to switch the color to green. That way, when my teammates come in and see this, they'll be like, oh, cool, sprinting functionality is finally in a 1.0 state. It works, right? Crouching functionality also works. I went ahead and I polished that up. So I'll delete the comment about work in progress. I'll switch that over to green. Good to go. Cool. Flashlight functionality also is working. So you know what? Let's go ahead and let's mark that as complete. For now, we can always go, we're probably going to go back and edit this later on. Nothing's totally final, you know what I mean? This game's just barely getting started in development. And this is the latest thing. And I didn't put work in progress on this one. The one that definitely needs work in progress, I didn't do it. So this is the search input. And search right now is controlled, if you're using gamepad, the search button is controlled with the right trigger. If you're using mouse and keyboard, it's controlled with the left mouse button. And it's not a toggle, it's a press and release. So you have to hold the button down to search and release it to get out of search mode or whatever. Okay, cool. So let me run through real quick how this works. This is kind of a first iteration. I'll probably end up going in here later on and maybe modifying things, changing things as we play test and realize, you know what, this is good, but it needs a couple of modifications. I'll probably end up doing that. So let me go through how this works. First, you hit the search button. The first thing that we do is we do a check. We check the player's not sprinting. I didn't want the player to be able to do a search while sprinting. I want the player to stop and, you know, walk around, take their time to do a search, right? kind of like in real life. In real life, if you needed to grab something in your room, you're not going to sprint in circles around your room looking for your car keys. Or at least I've never searched for my car keys that way. I'll walk over to where I think I left them, to like on top of a dresser or table, under the bed, around a toilet, wherever the last place is I think I left my keys. And I'll just walk around, stop, and kind of do a search, a scan with my eyes. So I want to get that same kind of feel for this. I took the sprinting variable. Remember, if we're sprinting is set to true. And when we're not sprinting, it's set back to false. So this is going to check for us and make sure that we're not sprinting. If we're not sprinting, then we can go ahead and do some stuff. I've got a sequence node here. I'm probably going to delete that later on because I was going to do some other stuff here off this sequence, but I realized later on that I don't really need to, or maybe I forgot what I was going to do. So it just stayed right there, but I'll probably get rid of it. Who knows? And then I created a timer function. I'll go over this timer function a little bit later. Right now I want to show you, here's the camera zoom. This is just a basic timeline with a float curve. And what it's set to start off at the default 90-degree field of view. And then it goes down to 50 degrees. And it takes 1 second to do that. So I thought 1 second was a good amount of time. I can always change that and make the zoom faster, but 1 second feels good. It's kind of like your eyes are slowly kind of focusing on stuff. I just thought that felt pretty good. So what I do is I take the first person camera, which is this camera right here, and I take its field of view, and I allowed the timeline to change the field of view from 90 all the way down to 50 in a duration of time that lasts for about 1 second. Okay, and that sets the field of view. And then when you release the search button, it reverses it, and that's what gives me this really nice smooth. So if I hit it and I let it go, it goes back. See that? But if I hold it down, it stays zoomed in. When I let it go, it zooms back out. So I can go halfway and stop, and it goes back to a zoom out, or not a zoom out, but the default, right? If I show you here in the viewport, well, if I show you here in the viewport, you'll see there's this first person camera. And if we look over here on the right, here's the field of view. If you want to zoom a camera in or out, the field of view is what you want to control. Okay, field of view is basically your zoom in and your zoom out. That's how that works. So it's pretty simple. Now this timer by function, if I hit the zoom in button and let it go quickly, well, that's not quick enough. Anyway, when I hit it, it waits for about a second, and then you see the line trace, the spherical line trace, shoot out. It doesn't shoot out immediately. And the reason I wanted that was because I wanted you to start to be zooming in pretty far into it before the character actually fires the trace, which hits, say, a door, and then you get the hint. Because if not, you get the hint immediately when you start to zoom in, and then it feels like you already saw the hint before you fully zoomed in. So what's the point of zooming in the first place? I want the player to feel like they're focusing, and then they get the hint, right? So that's why I created this timer with a 0.5, with a half second delay. Which is okay. I can always change that delay to 1 second or more if I wanted to. And here's the function. And my function is actually over here. If I double click on my function, there it is. I can see it. It's a pretty simple function. This is a typical ray trace setup. So I'm using a sphere trace for objects. And you can see down here I've got this commented where it says get forward vector for player camera to calculate trace direction and distance. So you take the player camera, and this is real simple. There's an example of this in the Unreal Engine online documentation, but If you want to look at this from the video, it's pretty simple. You get the world location of the camera, and you get its world rotation. You take the world location and you pipe that into the start point for the trace, which is you, your camera, your eyes, right? That's where the trace is going to start. And where is it going to end? Well, first of all, you're going to need to determine what direction it goes into, because by default, this thing is going to go in the wrong direction, and you're going to get frustrated if you try to do this. So you get the world rotation from the camera, and then you get the forward vector of that rotation, and that's going to tell Unreal, okay, I want the line trace to go in the direction that the player's facing at all times, right? Which makes sense. And then you take that forward vector and you multiply it by whatever distance you want. This is the distance, see, distance to trace. So if you want this trace to go 1,000,000 units, you could do that if you wanted to, if you wanted the trace to go. So if you were doing, like, say, a sniper rifle and you needed a trace for a bullet to go half a mile away, you would, figure out what distance you wanted, like, I don't know, 50,000 Unreal units, pipe that in, and now you've got a rifle that can shoot 50,000 units away. In this case, I just want the player to be able to zoom in and focus on things that are kind of close to the player, not right in front of their face, but not, a football field away. So 300 units for now is good. Then you add the results of that to the world location, plus. You add that stuff, and then you take the result into the end of the sphere trace. And then you can set a radius for that spherical trace that we saw, which I set it to a value of 10. I didn't want it to be too big or too small so you miss stuff. 10 seems like it's okay. And then you'll need to plug in an array into your objects type. And I'm not going to go over what arrays are, but if you do a Google search for arrays, you can learn more about them and stuff. They're pretty easy. It's basically just a variable with a bunch of stuff in it. So if I select this variable called interactive objects, you can see my default values. I've got 3 elements in this array. So basically what that does is it kind of filters the trace so that it looks for objects that are either dynamic, static, physics bodies. I mean, you can choose a whole bunch of stuff here. You can choose world static, world dynamic, pawn objects, physics bodies, vehicles, destructible, etc. For interactive objects, I'm going to be using world dynamic. I just ended up choosing all these 3 for debugging purposes, but in the end, I'll probably just use world dynamic. That makes sense. If you don't plug anything in here and you try to compile, you're going to get an error. So keep that in mind. Don't really mess with any of the other settings except the debug by default set to none. And what that means is if I jump in Unreal, you see that you no longer see that red trace object anymore. It's still there. It's not gone. It's just invisible. But if I want to, I could choose a debug type. So I can say show it for 1 frame, right? Come in here. Actually, it's not even showing up. I could make it persistent, so it'll stay there. Remember how before it was disappearing? Now it's just going to stay there. It's not going to disappear. Sometimes you want to do that for debugging purposes. I'm going to put it for duration. Actually, you know what? Since I know it works and I don't need to debug anymore, I'll switch it to none. And that's it. That's the entire camera spherical trace function. I can reuse this function as many times as I want. Just take it, drag and drop it into here. Boom, there it is. I want to reuse it for whatever reason. Okay, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I worked on tonight. Yeah, anyway, I'll keep working on this and record another one of these DevDoc videos, and hopefully you guys find it interesting and most of all useful for your own game projects.